taller regional. Vamos a dar inicio hoy a este taller regional enmarcado en el programa de comparación internacional del ciclo 2021 para América Latina y el Caribe. Este taller enfocado en la encuesta de maquinaria y equipo va a realizarse a partir de hoy, 25 de enero, hasta el 28, entre las 10 de la mañana y las 12:30 hora de Chile, 2 horas y media que vamos a estar dedicando cada uno de estos 4 días a resolver y profundizar aspectos relevantes de esta encuesta de maquinaria y equipo como parte del programa de comparación internacional en su ciclo 2021. Vamos a dar inicio y antes informarles que esta reunión va a ser grabada y que en esta oportunidad todos están como participantes, por lo cual les pedimos por favor que mantengan sus micrófonos y sus cámaras apagadas y que para cualquier comentario o pregunta, por favor, utilicemos el chat. También informarles que en este taller regional tenemos el servicio de traducción simultánea, para lo cual en la parte inferior de su pantalla hay un simbolito como un mundo. Ese por favor lo pueden activar y ahí escogen el lenguaje, inglés, español, de acuerdo a lo que cada uno requiera. Listo, para esta oportunidad, entonces, la agenda que vamos a tener, le voy a iniciar las palabras de bienvenida a este taller regional y enseguida también le voy a dar la palabra a mi colega William Vigil del Banco Mundial, que también tiene unas palabras de bienvenida.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you all for joining this 4-day workshop on the machinery and equipment component of the 2021 ICP cycle. For those of you who don't already know me, my name is William Vigil Oliver. I'm here today on behalf of the ICP Global Office at the World Bank, together with my colleague, Rui Costa. As many of you that have previously carried out ICP work may attest, the ICP Machinery and Equipment Survey is a tricky one. In theory, it's the easiest of the so-called special surveys, as its pricing approach is to a large extent the same as that of the household consumption survey. There's a list of identical items or very similar items, and each country must then go out there and price them across their territory. But as we all know in practice, the devil is really in the details, and implementing the ICP Machinery and Equipment Survey can at times be challenging, as it often requires one, specialized knowledge to some extent on the items being priced, and two, alternative ways of accessing and collecting the required price data. So with this in mind, this week, you'll see a series of presentations that will hopefully shed some light on the survey, and in the process, make the tasks involved for price collection more manageable. So I invite you all to pay attention, to take notes, to ask questions throughout the sessions, so that by the end of the week, we're all on the same page in terms of knowing what is needed and required in order to properly carry out this particular survey. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, William, por las palabras de bienvenida y en nombre de la división y en nombre de nuestro director, el señor Rolando Campo. Yo también voy a darles la bienvenida a esta reunión técnica de encuestas especiales enfocada en el tema de la encuesta de maquinaria y equipo. Saludar muy especialmente a todos nuestros colegas del Banco Mundial que nos han apoyado y que seguimos trabajando duro en esta ronda, y a nuestros colegas de CARICOM, y especialmente también al consultor, el señor Peter Tabor, quien nos va a colaborar en los detalles específicos del taller. Agradecer su participación en esta reunión técnica de encuestas especiales, y como mencionaba, esta vez enfocando los detalles y la presentación en todas las cuestiones de maquinaria de equipo, que es uno de los temas más específicos que se tratan en la ronda del PCI. Los puntos a ser tratados, como lo ven en la agenda, corresponden a dar continuidad a este proceso de implementación del ciclo 2021 del Programa de Comparación Internacional para América Latina y el Caribe, en el cual la CEPAL junto con la Oficina Global tienen los temas de coordinación en la región. El objetivo es básicamente poner en contexto y entregar los lineamientos para llevar adelante la recolección de los precios referida a la lista de productos de maquinaria y equipo, así como también ofrecer un espacio de discusión sobre los elementos relevantes de esta encuesta. Y eso se va a hacer a través de las presentaciones que estarán a cargo. Hay alguien que tiene el micrófono encendido. Por favor, les pedimos que todos mantengan el micrófono apagado. Entonces les decía que para la profundización de estos temas, nuestros colegas del Banco Mundial presentarán el panorama de la encuesta de maquinaria y equipo en el ciclo 2021, y la CEPAL hará una presentación sobre los principales aspectos de la conducción de esta encuesta en el ciclo anterior, en la ronda en el ciclo 2017, y básicamente enfocada a las experiencias aprendidas de esa ronda. Las demás presentaciones del taller de estos 4 días estarán a cargo del experto en este tema, el señor Peter Tabor, quien ha apoyado estas mismas temáticas, tanto en la oficina global como en la implementación del programa en otras regiones, con muy buenos resultados. Asimismo, durante toda la reunión estarán los colegas de la división de CEPAL, de la unidad, y nuestros compañeros también del Banco Mundial, atentos a cualquier comentario, a cualquier pregunta o aclaración que se pueda presentar durante cada una de las distintas sesiones que tendremos estos 4 días. Durante estas 4 jornadas previstas para este taller tendremos un trabajo muy arduo, como mencionaba William, muy detallado y de muchas especificaciones técnicas para cada producto revisado, con el propósito de que se puedan llevar a cabo los elementos y la revisión de cada uno de los ítems, y que se lleven información y lineamientos para las etapas siguientes de recolección de precios y de envío de esa información a nosotros. Bueno, ya les mencioné que el taller tiene traducción simultánea, y que después de cada sesión haremos una ronda de preguntas y comentarios. Por favor, para todo esto, utilizar el chat, y sin más, desearles muchos éxitos y aprovechamiento de todos los procesos de aprendizaje que vamos a tener durante esta semana. Bienvenidos y muchas gracias. Bueno, para dar continuidad a la agenda, quisiéramos, Claudia, no sé si tienes por ahí la agenda y hacemos, si la podrías proyectar, por favor. Gracias. Como les mencionaba, entonces la sesión, el taller durante estos 4 días, 2 horas y media en cada una de los días, vamos a tener distintas sesiones. En la sesión número 2, que es la que vamos a iniciar ahora, vamos a tener entonces, como les mencionaba, una presentación de parte del Banco Mundial para ver el panorama de la encuesta de maquinaria y equipo y después el panorama va a estar a cargo de la presentación, va a estar a cargo de el colega Rui Costa del Banco Mundial, y luego tendremos una presentación de la lista de los ítems y los datos requeridos para la encuesta a cargo del consultor Peter Tabor. Finalmente, vamos a tener la presentación de las lecciones aprendidas por parte de nuestra colega de CEPAL, Ernestina Pérez, y con eso cerraríamos la sesión 2. En la sesión 3, entonces, volvemos.
Porque a mí de repente no me escucha.
En la sesión 3 tenemos, continuamos con la revisión de lista de ítems y especificaciones de encuesta de maquinaria y equipo.
¿Qué quiere?
Y hasta ahí cerramos el día de hoy. Entonces, vamos a darle paso a nuestro...
Tu micrófono, mi micrófono.
Banco Mundial. Para ver la presentación sobre
Ana,
el panorama de la...
Ana, perdón, pero creo que Paula Fuenzalía tiene encendido su micrófono.
Sí, hola.
No, perdón, ¿qué pasó? ¿Aló?
Les pedimos a todos que por favor apaguen sus micrófonos para poder escucharnos bien. Gracias. Bueno, entonces vamos a darle paso a la presentación, al inicio de la sesión 2, con la presentación del panorama de la encuesta de maquinaria y equipo. Esta presentación está a cargo de nuestro colega Rui Costa del Banco Mundial, y te dejo la palabra, Rui.
Thank you, Ana Victoria, for the welcoming words, and thank you, William. Thank you to Backlog for organizing this meeting, and good morning, everyone. Ana Victoria, I'm asking you to stop sharing your screen, please. Thank you. So can you all see my presentation?
Yes.
Can you confirm? Okay, thank you. So this is the overview of the machinery and equipment survey on behalf of the World Bank. So as you know, ICP PPPs require collecting prices and compiling expenditures for the whole range of final goods and services comprised GDP, among which are the machinery and equipment goods. The ICP classification provides a means of systematically identifying the components of GDP by breaking down its expenditures into major aggregates, which are then subdivided into categories, groups, classes, and basic headings. The ICP price surveys are designed to suit the characteristics of the ICP classification aggregate under consideration. However, some aggregates require special data collection forms due to the difficulty in collecting prices for them, such as government, gross capital formation, etc. So this is the ICP classification hierarchy. So under GDP, there is gross fixed capital formation, and one of the components of gross fixed capital formation is machinery and equipment. And for this survey, we have 5 basic headings for which we will collect prices, and 2 other basic headings for which we use reference PPPs. So the prices that we are collecting are only referring to these, are subdivided into these 5 basic headings. And the other 2 are also part of the machinery equipment group, but we don't collect prices for them. The importance of the machinery and equipment aggregate should not be underestimated, as reflected by its high expenditure share in countries' nominal GDP figures. So this is an example from the last cycle, the ICP 2017, and we can see that the mean and the median weight of the machinery and equipment are around 11 and 10% respectively. So this is indeed a very significant survey, because for this single survey as a very high weight. Sorry, someone has the mic on. Can turn it off. Yes, so this is a very relevant survey because this single survey represents a high expenditure share over total GDP. And for that reason, this survey must be carefully planned and carried out. Next, so what are the requirements for this survey? So the machinery and equipment survey has its own data collection form, which is an Excel file, which you have access to. And it is important to note that machinery and equipment items tend to have very detailed technical specifications and may require consultation with experts. So as William and Ana Victoria have said before, this survey appears simple in its methodology because it's similar to the household survey goods. However, the technical specifications are very demanding, very strict. The machinery equipment item list generally includes one item identified by brand and model and another generic item with the exact same characteristics, but not identified by brand and model. So what this means is that the item list for many items has always one item that is a specified branded model, such as a truck, a Mercedes truck of a specific model. And then we have another truck, which can be from another brand. And of course, it will be a different model. And it will be a truck that is similar to the Mercedes truck. So it will have the same characteristics as the Mercedes truck, but can be a different brand and model. We will see an example of that further. So for each item, the data collection form asks countries to report the unit, is always the unit price. And in addition to the unit price, you need to report the unit cost of transporting the asset, any charges for installation. This is common for industrial equipment, any unit discounts, and any non-deductible product taxes paid by the purchaser. The total unit price is then calculated directly on the data form, assuming that all the relevant cells are filled. And we will also see an example of this. So the data collection form, as you know from other surveys, as a general tab with general instructions to be read at first, and then you put your country name, ISO country code, currency, and reference year, which will be 2021. On the survey itself, this is an example of one item. So as I was saying before, in this case, this is clearly identified by make and model. So we're looking for a diesel motor, diesel generating set for continuous time use. And we have this identification here of brand and model. And here are the characteristics. So the characteristics are always shown in metric and imperial units. You choose the ones that are most relevant in your country. And finally, on this field is where you insert the characteristics observed in your country. So in this example, suppose that you find exactly this brand. It's a Caterpillar, it's a C9, same model. Then you can simply copy these characteristics to the observed field. but the observed field needs to be filled even if the characteristics are the same. However, if the characteristics are slightly different, you also you introduce the different characteristics. So this is the example for one that is an identified make and model. And next we will see an example of a generic item, what you call a generic item. So this item is identical to the previous one, but its proposed make and model are unspecified, which means that you can choose another make and model. So suppose that you find one diesel generating set from Hyundai, you will observe the make Hyundai and different model for that Hyundai. The technical characteristics are in this case all the same, they are identical to the previous model. And the same logic applies. So here on the observed field, you write the observed characteristics, which might differ slightly from the one specified, but ideally they should be identical match. So here on the next, if you scroll down through after filling these characteristics, you scroll down the datasheet and you will find these fields. So the first field is for prices. You begin by inserting the unit base price, and then order quantity, delivery cost per unit, installation cost per unit, other unit costs that apply, any discount per unit if applicable, and non-deductible taxes. At the end, the formula will calculate the total unit price net of deductible taxes and discounts. Here, next under notes. So these notes are notes that apply to the specific item. So these are the notes for the C9 Caterpillar diesel engine. But here on the comments, you can write anything that you find relevant. It doesn't have to be related with the notes. It can be, we found slightly different specifications for this and that reason, or you may comment about the delivery costs or the installation costs, anything that you find relevant to explain how you calculated the final price. And finally, in the last field, you insert the date of collection. So this is the date of where the price collection was observed. And this concludes my presentation. So thank you. And if you have any questions or comments, please write them in the chat. We will answer them at the end, or if we can answer them through the chat as well, we will. Okay, so thank you for your attention. And now I will pass the words to consultant Peter Tabor for the next presentation.
Gracias, Rui. Muchas gracias por tu presentación. Y sí, le damos entonces la bienvenida a nuestro consultor experto en el tema de maquinaria y quien trabaja o pertenece a la empresa Blanco Consulting, quien también ya nos ha colaborado con la oficina global y con otras regionales en esta temática. Le damos la bienvenida para hacer esta presentación del panorama general de la lista de ítems y datos requeridos en la encuesta de maquinaria y equipo. Bienvenido, señor Peter Tabor.
Thank you very much, Anna. Can you all hear me? I hope so. If
Sí,
not,
señor.
give me a note. Okay, thank you very much. In fact, some of you may already know me from a previous workshop we had in the ICP 2017 cycle in Bogota, when I gave a short presentation on the same topic. But that then was after the collection was made, so that was during the validation phase. I worked on this topic for quite a long time now, and hope that you may benefit from my experience. I know my presentation is going to be very, very technical and very, very full. Please be assured that I know that is probably a bit too much for a single presentation, or for a single presentation after 4 days. But I thought that most of the material might also be used as reference material after the workshop. So if the workshop presentations are shared, you may benefit from additional information given there. So we will be quite quick on a number of the items and on a number of the slides, but I hope we can manage to understand everything. And I promise you the first day is going to be the worst, because it's the worst basic heading that we are attacking first. Okay. Other acknowledgements. Let's see. Part of the material that I'm going to present was already made for presentations during the 4th regional workshop in the end of June 2021 for Asia and the Pacific for the same topic. And we got the permission from Asian Development Bank to use this material, and we want to thank Asian Development Bank for being allowed to do that. The outline for the current presentation is, first of all, I'm going to give you some information on the overall objective, then provide some definitions in addition to what Rui has already mentioned, because I think some of you might need some more explanation. Then we will detail some informations on the changes on the machinery and equipment list in the 2021 ICP cycle. And then probably the most important part of the presentation, the guidelines for the price collection and some words about some sources of price information. Okay, the current list was prepared by the Global Office. They incorporated recent Eurostat OECD updates on the product list that were used at Eurostat. We have also assisted Eurostat in doing the validation of this ICP 2021 part at the Eurostat office. And there we had 39 countries collecting prices, and we got the okay from Eurostat to use some intermediate results that may be used as benchmark figures for the validation for other parts of the world too. And we thank them for doing that. World Bank created an updated product list from the 2017 list, incorporating the changes made by a Eurostat OECD survey. And also, after further consultations with other regional implementing agencies, suggestions and some corrections on the item specifications. All the items that are in the current machinery and equipment list that you are going to see today and in the next 3 days are global core items. There are currently no items which are only specific for the LAC region. That's important to note. So if anything is made special for the LAC region, for some of the generic items or unspecified items, we need to take note of that and inform the Global Office accordingly. What is your task? If possible, you should collect the maximum number of available and representative items which are used in your respective economy, and you should try to price that to the extent possible. The items that you price, they should satisfy the specifications that are provided on the structured product descriptions, or abbreviated SPDs. These are important to observe and to study carefully. Machinery and equipment items are divided into 2 types. As Rui already said, we have specified and unspecified items. Unspecified items, they are also referenced, as Rui did too, as generic items. They have, of course, specifications. In fact, they have identical specifications to the counterpart specified model, but make a model are left out. So specified is an item for which all the specifications are completely given in the SPD, including the make or brand and the model name, as well as important technical parameters provided by the manufacturer in catalogs or other information. Unspecified is an item which has the same specifications as the specified item counterpart, except for the make and the model name. Because there have been some misunderstandings in that, please make sure to put the information for the unspecified items at the correct position. Typically, in the list, you have always a pair of items, and the unspecified one comes first. So if you have a series of, let's say, 3 screens or monitors, and you have 3 unspecified and 3 specified, the sequence is unspecified 1 and specified 1, unspecified 2, specified 2. So please don't enter the information at the wrong position. There are some exceptions, especially in the first basic heading that we are going to cover today, because we have some items there where we only have unspecified items, but we will detail on that first. In our presentations, we are, with these exceptions, only discussing the branded items. And so if you have some need for information on the counterpart unspecified item, please refer to the specified item that belongs to that. Okay, how do you identify what's specified, what unspecified? Very easy, it's given in the item name. And in the top of the screen, you will also see this area, which is for a specified item. We have a given brand, that's Barco from Sweden. The item is the Barco 325. And in the counterpart position, you have the same technical parameters as for this one. So that's an exact copy, but you don't have a given brand. So over here, you might, for instance, take something from a different make that you know that is very popular in your country, that most officials and professionals use. Especially with hand tools and other things. I'm going to stress that in a later section again, but I think it's important to mention that as often as possible. Please only use professional equipment to be priced in that survey. Don't price something that is simply do-it-yourself equipment for hand tools or something like that. We had problems with that because the price levels of this do-it-yourself equipment, they are such a big portion lower than the professional ones. So if you have hand drills or other things, there are always cheap models and more expensive ones. Please take the professional ones. Don't price the cheapest things. The SPDs I already mentioned. So an SPD lists the complete item characteristics that are relevant for a group of items. So for instance, for a group of monitors or a group of walkie-talkies. And World Bank has done quite an amount of work in making these SPDs more up-to-date compared to what we have at the Eurostat list. For a particular item, the characteristics which are relevant for an item are then selected from the SPD. So not all of the characteristics that are available in an SPD need to be used for a particular item, but they could. Special focus is on those characteristics which are price determining. So for instance, if you have the power of a motor for a car or for a truck, that is something that is quite important because generally speaking, a more powerful motor is more expensive than the other one if you have the same model and brand otherwise. The general purpose why we are doing this is we want to ensure that we only compare like with like, because otherwise you are measuring differences between different, let's say, qualities of items rather than measuring differences across economies. So that is what we want to avoid. In order to be able to do that, I want to stress again something that Rui Costa already mentioned. Please fill in all the specifications, even if they are the same. But do not only use copy and paste if there is a difference mentioned in any source that you had for obtaining a price for an item, where they say, well, this parameter is different. Please report the different parameter rather than the original one in such a case, because in many of the cases, this points us to misunderstandings or something else by the person who priced the item, who looked up the price or something else. And if you report these differences, we can spot that during validation and probably find out why some prices are outliers. So please report what you actually priced and report the specifications for that. Okay, definition of comparability of an item. Ideally, we would all like to have only identical items. All the specifications are exactly the same as prescribed in the SPD, including the make and the model. Comparable, well, this is an item which has very close or even the same specifications to the specified item, except for the make and model. These comparable models should be reported not at the identical item position, so at the branded one, but at the counterpart unspecified item. Please make sure if you price something at the branded item position, only price that brand and make and model there. And the third one would be something if you would not find a very close match of what we have, but something which is quite similar, serves the same purpose and use, you might report that. That might help for the preparation of the next survey cycle, but it will not necessarily mean that this item price can be used in the current survey. Now, changes on the machinery and equipment item list from 2017 cycle to the 2021 cycle. As I already said, the specifications across a group of items within a basic heading were normalized and missing parameters were filled in. This is especially important for the not branded items because over there the model name is no longer necessarily the same. And so you might have different parameters, slightly different parameters, and might need more information than just the model name. In the survey catalog, that is material that you will get together with the data collection form, there are also item images. Some of the item images in ICP 2017 were not showing exactly the correct item, but a different variant or something with a small deviation. And so World Bank and we tried to avoid that for the 2021 cycle and provided new item images for a couple of items. In addition, of course, machinery and equipment is something that in some cases changes very quickly, especially, let's say, for computers and things like monitors and things like that. So we have new or updated models for some of the specified items. In fact, that were 51 of the specified item. Among them, we have 10 in basic heading other products where we are not going to collect prices. So these new or updated models were introduced, and of course, the counterpart unspecified item was altered accordingly. Finally, 6 new items, 3 specified and their counterpart unspecified items were added to the list. One thing that might be important when you do your inter-country validation, if you have collected a price for an item in ICP 2017 and now have an item at the same item position, but with an updated model, that might mean that this model is no longer at the same price level as the other one. So we have a couple of new or updated models where the price in ICP 2021 is expected to be way higher or lower than the one for the same item code in ICP 2017. So if you do some comparisons in Excel with that, you might see some deviations which are way above or below 1. We will provide preliminary figures for that, for the validation, and for some of the expected factors, we give you some examples and notes in the next presentations. Of course, these figures are still preliminary, as the 2021 survey for the European comparison program is not yet closed. That is going to happen at the end of April. After the end of April, these figures are regarded as final, and we will then be able to share with you minimum, maximum, and geometric mean of the prices for our items, or for the items which are common in both lists. This will be submitted to the people at ECLAC, and they will then disseminate the material accordingly. Okay, how many items do we have? Well, quite a number, roughly about 200, 6 more, the 3 added items than we had last time. But last time you also collected prices for other products, which includes software and some furniture and musical instruments and things like that. These 20 items are not collected this time. So in fact, machinery and equipment, the overall number of items that we are going to collect prices for is maximum 182. This is evenly divided between specified and unspecified items, 91 of each. The changes in the list are in electrical optical equipment. We added an item, in general, no, sorry, in special purpose machinery and in road transport equipment. Okay, some of the changes to illustrate what we mean by that. This was an item image on the right-hand side that was in the last survey catalog for ICP 2017 cycle. And we are looking at this item for an item with dual rear wheels that's given in the specification. And so we have this clearly marked over here because that was a change in the list. We changed that item. That is for a lorry chassis cab made by Ford. It's the model Transit 350 L3, which is length 3 with dual rear wheels. Second type of a change is a new or updated model. In ICP 2017, we had an automotive tool set made by Facom, which consisted of the tool set 2143.m in a box. This one you see over here. And right now, there is no such item by Facom anymore. And Facom now offers a similar set in foam trays. These are these over here. And this is the set CM.138 without the box. So in such a case, the price might change quite significantly, and you will get some information on this, as I said, later. And finally, the new items on the list, one in electrical and optical equipment, one in special purpose machinery, one in road transport. Electrical optical equipment is a laser meter made by Hilti. In special purpose machinery, we have something for solar energy inverter made by Fronius, Austrian company. And for the tractor units, after a discussion with World Bank decided not only to have the Scania on the list, but also the Volvo. So this Volvo was added to the list. And of course, as I said, the counterpart unspecified items. Okay, so as Rui already said, general instructions and notes for recording of data can be found in one of the tabs of the collection form. You should collect prices for equipment goods consistent with the valuation of these goods as fixed capital assets in national accounts, so same groups of items. And please make sure, we had problems with that last time, to report all of your prices in local currency units only. So do not mix that there, and report the name of the currency in your country data tab to make sure that we have the correct currency, and then use that currency only. If you have to do currency conversions for one reason or the other, please report that in the comments that you can add to each item, and report the converted price. Important to know, especially if you have, for instance, Mac computers or laptop or Apple laptops, sometimes they offer special prices for students or teachers. Such prices must not be reported. Please report only those prices which are available for the commercial purchaser. That also includes if you do the price collection yourself, and sometimes if you call a company and ask for a price and state that you are somebody working for the government, they might be tempted to give you a government price. Please make sure that you inform them only to report a price for the commercial purchaser, not for government. Okay, and then finally, the total unit price, as we said, it must include the cost of transporting the goods to the place where it will be used, charges for installing the asset, if they are going to be paid by the commercial buyer, and actual import duties and other product taxes paid by the purchaser. But anything which is deductible, so in most cases, for instance, value-added tax from the price, that should not be included in the price. Also deducted are the discounts. They are provided in the entry form as a separate entry field, where you can just specify the percentage of discount which are generally available. The order quantity, there are some items which you would normally not order as one item. So generally speaking, the order quantity is one. There are some exceptions. For instance, fire extinguishers or scanner scales, or one example we have in the basically fabricated metal products, beer kegs. You don't order a beer keg if you are a commercial buyer just one at a time. You order, for instance, like 1,000, because otherwise the transport costs are dominating in the price and are not realistic for the commercial buyer. Transport cost, if the company charges transport costs, these costs should be reported. If you have to have something where they don't actually calculate the transport cost, but where it is clear that the purchaser would have to pay for the transport, the cost should be estimated. I know that is sometimes a problem, especially in long countries. Well, we have something like that in Europe, where we have Norway. And if I think about South America, probably Chile is a good example of a long country where you may have large distances. Please, in such cases, make an educated guess of the transport gas cost that would have to be paid. Installation costs, they are typically only relevant for installation of bigger parts of equipment. They might also include charges for testing and calibration. For transport equipment, typically, that is what we found over here, installation costs are neither usual nor typical. Other costs would be something, for instance, like insurance costs for the transport, registration for road transport equipment, or something like that. Everything that has to be paid by the final customer there would have to be included too. Discounts, as I already said, if not otherwise specified, price should be for the purchase of a single item, so no mass discounts, but discounts that are normally available for most purchases and that are available for most of the year should be taken into account. There are sometimes some special offer or clearance sales or things like that. Please try to avoid pricing things like that, because that would not reflect the general annual average. and so this should not be reported. Only non-deductible product taxes should be included. So if, for instance, value-added tax is included and is normally deductible, then that should not be reported. Other product taxes like import duties may also be partially or fully deductible. So if they are deductible, don't report them. If they are not deductible, report them. So probably to keep in mind what happens, what we want finally is the purchases price net of deductible taxes and discount. And that is calculated as unit-based price plus delivery cost per unit, plus installation cost per unit, plus other costs per unit, plus non-deductible taxes, minus percentage of discounts. Then we get the final price. Per unit, this is important, especially if you have an order size which is more than one. Please do not use the full transport cost for the unit price. Use the transport cost divided by the number of units that it is including. Okay, I see a comment in the chat box. Is that relating to us, or is that okay? If nobody interferes, I assume
we are fine. It's a comment for Rui.
Okay. So I continue with that then. Okay, as I said, we want to have national average prices. Price collection was originally. Could somebody mute their phone? Thank you. We want national average prices. The price collection was originally recommended for the third quarter of 2021, as the reference year, as we said, is 2021. One thing we had, and I think in the last cycle, is used equipment. Please do not price any used equipment. This must not be done. We can't compare these prices across countries. So even if, for instance, big construction machinery is typically used as used equipment in your country, you can't report these prices. It needs to be new, brand new. Geographic coverage. For small economies, you may probably only need one price for a single location. Typically, countries select the capital city or the largest industrial or commercial town. If you have large countries with several industrial areas, that might have an influence on the prices. So in these cases, you should probably collect prices in several locations. The same holds for the number of price observations. If you have, for instance, hand tools and you have lots of shops selling these, you should probably report several prices, or an average of several prices, I should better say, rather than just the cheapest price. So typically, if I do something like a research for, let's say, a computer, I go to a price comparison page, check if I can find the computer there. If I find it, I take an average of a reasonable number of shops selling this. This might be better than just selecting the cheapest one. But you should make an educated guess what is probably better for your country. Decision of whether you price one or more price observation, that needs to be done by the national experts. Okay, which are sources of price information? First, you may have already some information at your own National Statistical Office. I remember that there's, for instance, a registration database in one of the Southeast European countries, where they actually have, for several models of cars, they have sales volumes and actual prices that were paid for this. So that might be something where you could find a price. Your colleagues that are dealing with producer price indices, they may have sources for prices. They might help. Of course, you can email or visit or phone dealers and distributors of the items or makers of the items. You may also have information from government departments and ministries. In Germany, for instance, would be German Ministry of Transport and the German Statistical Office that might share some information with us, which would of course help them. And then probably last, but in fact not the least source for prices is the internet. For an increasing number of items, you find prices readily on the internet. I think for the current survey that we have at Eurostat, the share is way above 50% of the prices are prices taken from the internet. In such a case, you should also apply additional research. If you have prices where you know that there is a significant discount normally available, you should then at least call the dealer or a distributor and ask whether you get additional information on discounts. You might either conduct the survey yourself, but in many cases, an external expert may be necessary to give you some guidance on pricing the items or even finding prices for the items. And of course, you can make a mixture of these both approaches. More information concerning the price collection will be provided in the 4th session of this workshop, recommendations for data compilation. And that closes my presentation for this session. Thank you very much for your attendance and for listening to what I said. I hope it was not too technical, and I'm open to questions. Back to you, Claudia.
Thank you, Peter.
Muchas gracias, Peter, por tu presentación. Muchas gracias por ese panorama general y el detalle de la descripción de la lista de los ítems, la revisión que se está haciendo, la inclusión de nuevos productos en esta lista y esas características específicas de reporte de precios sobre las cuales todos estos días del taller iremos profundizando. Antes de, bueno, de nuevo les pedimos que si tienen preguntas o comentarios, por favor los pongan en el chat. Y antes de pasar a la presentación por parte de CEPAL sobre las lecciones del ciclo 2017, le dejo la palabra a Claudia, que tenemos algunas preguntas en el chat. Por favor, ¿me ayudas, Clau?
De todas maneras, Vicky, tenemos una pregunta a Rui sobre la presentación que hizo Rui Costa del Banco Mundial por parte de Stefan Paul o Paul Stefan. No sé si quisiera él hacer la pregunta directamente. Si es así, puede desmutear su computador, bien digo, y hacer la pregunta, o bien la leo yo y la puede contestar Rui. Voy yo entonces. Question on Rui's presentation. If I have a similar item, same intended use or has the same purpose, but the specifications are different from the listed on the questionnaire, would it be okay to still list it? This is the first part of the question. Also, if the product is sold, do you want to Rui, to answer this part?
Okay. Because there are 3 separate questions. So for this first question, as Peter also presented on his presentation, ideally we sorry, we have someone has an open mic.
Excuse me, that there is a micro open. Please mute your micro. Sorry. Please go ahead.
So ideally, we want to have the identical item, especially if it's the same make and model. All the characteristics must be the same. The unspecified brand and model, all characteristics should be the same, ideally. But if you can't find, and if the specifications differ slightly, you should still price it, because this might be comparable or not, but this might also be useful for us in future surveys to refine the item list. So what is important to note always is please verify all characteristics, whether the item is identical or not, and identify those characteristics that are different. And you can also make a note on the observations field. Okay, so this is for the first question. I can read the next one. So Stefan also asks if the product is sold only by pre-order, whereby a local company procures it internationally and ships it to be sold to the customer, should it be recorded in the questionnaire? So this is a more difficult question because it depends on what your national accounts approach is. So the thing is that we like theoretically everything can be procured online, or everything can be procured by the producers, but we need to make sure that we are pricing things that are actually sold and used in the country, and that this is also reflected in the national accounts. So for this, I will check with your colleagues in the national accounts, what is their approach regarding these imports of equipment. But we may also get back to this question later at the workshop if necessary for more clarity. And on the third and final question, what is your take on companies that offer free delivery with items purchased, or rather, they do not charge for delivery explicitly, as whether you take the free delivery or not, the item price remains the same. So this is the case where the delivery is not identified in the product. So the company just gives a price, and it's a single price, regardless whether you want to transport to the capital or to some remote location or wherever you want to transport. So if it is not possible to obtain the transport cost because the company says that it is free, then that means that the price is implicitly included in the unit price. So it's not that the delivery is actually free, but that the price is higher to compensate for those delivery costs. So ideally, you should identify the delivery costs of all items. If this is not possible because it's an implicit cost, then you only report the unit price. And you should also write an observation that the delivery is advertised as free. But please make sure that it is indeed free, because yes, sometimes it can be free only up to a certain value, or it's free only if you order X amounts of units. And because here we are always trying to price unit costs, please make sure that the delivery is in fact free. I'm not sure if there are any other questions. Okay, and Peter says that he's also going to add more comments. Thank you.
Yes, that was on the first issue. Thanks, Rui, for the explanation. I only can agree to that. But I want to give you an example where you find the exact model and different specifications. That would be something you would observe for motor cars. Well, I know they are not part of your survey, but they are part of the European comparison program. And due to the taxation of motor cars, some car producers then slightly change the power of the motor. So the power of the motor may be something like 99 horsepower, and if it is 99, it's cheap, and if it is above 100, you have to pay more tax, for instance. Then they would probably sell you this motor with 99 horsepower, although it's in fact even the same motor, it's only programmed differently. So that would be something we would nevertheless still be eager to know, that you have different specification over there, and we can then decide later of whether this is in fact the identical item just with a different program in the car, or whether it is something different. I think that is a good example for that.
Thank you, Peter, for this explanation. Any other question on these two presentations before going to the Ernestina's presentation? Okay.
Bueno,
Bien.
si no hay más. Hay otra pregunta en el chat. Ernestina, perdóname un segundito. Hay otra pregunta en el chat del señor Eduardo Prado. Dice, por favor, ¿podría explicar cómo definir la importancia de cada ítem a investigar? En sí todos son importantes en su respectiva área. ¿Cómo podemos diferenciarla entre 1 y 0? Peter or Rui?
Yes, I can answer. So
Well, I'm not sure whether it's Rui or me who should answer that.
Yes, I think that this is a parameter that is from the
Rui.
ICP, from other surveys. As you know, in the household consumption survey, we use this distinction between representative and less representative items. But in this case, we are not making any distinction. So you can mark them all as 1 or all as 0, because we are not using this parameter for this particular survey. Yeah.
Gracias, Rui. Podemos entonces volver a la agenda y le doy entonces la palabra a Ernestina Pérez, quien va a hacer la presentación sobre las lecciones aprendidas en el ciclo 2017 del Programa de Comparación Internacional para la encuesta de maquinaria y equipo desde la unidad de CEPAL, desde acá. Entonces, Ernestina, te dejo la palabra.
Gracias, Vicky. Buenos días a todos. Les voy a compartir la presentación. Esencialmente, más que las lecciones aprendidas, es un estado de situación del ciclo 2017 para que cada uno vaya viendo y adecuando la perspectiva al ciclo 2021. Les comparto la presentación.
Ya la vemos.
¿Se ve bien? Sin doble pantalla,
ahora
¿no?
sí, ahora sí.
Bien, gracias. Bueno, el estado de situación respecto al ciclo 2017, vamos a partir inicialmente con dos temas de bastante importancia y aspectos relevantes para las decisiones que se van a tomar respecto al ciclo 2021 en cada uno de los países respecto a la recolección de información. Lo primero de ellos tiene que ver con la cobertura que cada uno de los países logró en el ciclo previo. Los países que están en gris son aquellos que no pudieron entregar por diversas razones información respecto a estos ítems de gastos. En el caso de la primera columna, como ustedes pueden observar, como bien mencionaba Peter, los ítems recolectados o solicitados a ser recolectados en el ciclo 2017 eran 196, donde podemos observar que hay países que recolectan sobre los 140 o 120, como Brasil, como Ecuador, y hay países que levantan muy poquitos precios. Bueno, en el caso particular de las Islas Caimán, que levanta solo un ítem. Hay que recordar que estos 196 ítems se distribuyen en los diferentes encabezados básicos, que en este caso eran 6 en el ciclo 2017, y al ser 6 tenemos que pensar que cada uno de estos ítems, los 75 en el caso particular, por ejemplo, de Argentina, fueron distribuidos en los 6 encabezados. Igual situación es en el caso de Anguila o de Belice, que levantaron 6, en el caso de Anguila son 6 y todos van asociados a un solo encabezado básico. Eso significa que la estimación para este rubro de maquinaria y equipo, en el caso de Anguila, fue estimado y representado solo por un encabezado básico. En el caso de Belice tenemos 6 ítems levantados y los 6 estaban representando a 6 encabezados, lo que de alguna u otra forma nos da la impresión de que se levantó uno por cada encabezado. A diferencia del consumo de los hogares, aquí tenemos encabezados que tienen muchos ítems y encabezados que tienen menos. Como mencionó Peter en el recuadro resumen de los dos ciclos, tanto el 17 como el 21, tenemos un encabezado básico que es el segundo, que corresponde a equipos eléctricos y ópticos, que en sí tenía 66 ítems. Al estar representado solo por uno en este caso, o por muy poquitos en los otros casos, estamos representando un encabezado básico de una forma poco robusta, dado que un solo ítem no representa la cobertura ni la relación de precios del conjunto, en este caso de los 66, es decir, 65 restantes. Es por eso que este recuadro más que nada es para que cada uno de los países pueda observar y ver cómo puede hacer para hacer una recolección un poquito más robusta respecto a la representatividad del número de ítems y el número de encabezados que va a representar. Como ya se mencionaba, en esta ocasión solo van a ser 5, el encabezado 6, que correspondía a otros productos manufacturados, donde se encontraban los software, no va a ser recolectado en esta ocasión. Respecto a esto, vamos a ver algunos aspectos importantes respecto a las coberturas de los ítems. Como podemos observar, tenemos un conjunto de ítems que fue levantado al menos por el 60% de los países que entregaron información respecto a los ítems de la ronda o del ciclo 2017. Aquí ustedes pueden observar en el primer recuadro estos 5 ítems que al menos fueron levantados en 60% de los países, es decir, al menos 14 o 15 países de los que recolectaron información. El texto en negro corresponde al texto del ciclo 2017 y el texto en rojo corresponde al texto del ciclo 2021. Y lo que está en azul son los cambios que ocurrieron. En este caso, de los 5 ítems que levantó la mayor parte de los países, tenemos que hay uno que es el monitor de escritorio Dell, que pasa de un modelo a un nuevo modelo en la versión 2021. Cabe hacer notar que ahora, cuando haya concluido la reunión de maquinaria y equipo, les vamos a hacer llegar la versión en español de los formularios, que a la fecha de hoy todavía ustedes no disponen, pero sí va a haber traducción de los formularios y del material correspondiente a maquinaria y equipo. Por otra parte, también en CEPAL hemos hecho una recolección y una revisión y tenemos un conjunto amplio de catálogos respecto a los productos especificados, que también podemos poner a vuestra disposición para que tenga mayor facilidad al identificar tanto los productos especificados como los no especificados. El segundo recuadro nos muestra aquellos ítems que ninguno de los países recolectó. Estos 7 ítems que ustedes tienen aquí abajo son ítems que ninguno de los países entregó información y que cabría hacer notar para que cada uno pueda ver si efectivamente estos ítems no tienen presencia, ya sea porque la marca en sí no tiene presencia en el país, y no pueden recolectar un producto que sea no especificado con las características propias del específico, o efectivamente son ítems que no tienen mayor relevancia en cada uno de los países. A continuación, tenemos otro aspecto importante a ser destacado que tiene que ver con aquellos ítems que solo un país recolectó. ¿Qué pasa con estos ítems? Al estar recolectado solo por un país, esta información no la podemos comparar y por lo tanto no puede entrar al cálculo de la paridad para ese encabezado básico. Es por eso que se lo estamos destacando esencialmente para que aquellos países que pudieran levantar estos ítems que corresponden a ítems que solamente uno de ustedes pudo entregar información, lo pueda incorporar para así poder tener comparación y ganaríamos todos con poder incorporar toda esta información que no fue levantada. Como ya les mencioné, todo lo que está en texto en negro corresponde al ciclo 2017. Los textos en rojo son las denominaciones en el ciclo 2021. Y en este caso, el monitor de escritorio marca ISO, de origen japonés, mantiene el tipo de modelo o la serie del modelo que es Flex Scan en ambos ciclos, pero sin embargo, ustedes pueden observar que en el ciclo 2017 era el modelo EB2456BK. Sin embargo, hay una modificación en el nuevo ciclo, solamente en lo que respecta al modelo, no así a la serie del modelo. Ya así cada uno de los ítems hemos podido identificar aquellos que la denominación se mantiene, pero sin embargo el modelo cambia, o en este caso en el osciloscopio podemos observar no solo que el modelo cambia, sino también cambia la marca, no así el origen, pero sí mantienen las componentes y especificaciones y características de manera similar. Es por eso que hemos optado por hacerlos comparables en el sentido de una linealidad en los diferentes ciclos, independiente de que son ciclos distintos, y obviamente el precio del ciclo 2017 no va a ser comparado con el 2021, pero sin embargo sí son modelos que son asimilables como parte de la representación de los osciloscopios combinados analógicos o digitales. Entonces, hay 3 lecciones que debemos aprender aquí, aquellos ítems que no levantamos y que efectivamente podamos confirmar que no tienen mayor importancia, por lo tanto no tendría sentido de levantarlos ahora en el ciclo 2021. Por otro lado están los ítems que en este caso se los podemos hacer llegar, que fueron aquellos que se recolectaron en solo un país, o en solo 2, o en solo 3, para que ustedes puedan observar y ver la posibilidad de poder levantarlos, y eso nos va a ayudar a robustecer las comparaciones, y obviamente el resultado de las PPAs. Y finalmente, los aspectos importantes a tener en cuenta tienen que ver con la baja cobertura de la recolección, tanto en número de ítems, en el caso de algunos países que no pudieron levantar, y sería bueno ver la posibilidad de recolectar algunos de los encabezados, algunos de los ítems, porque al no poder comparar, ya no, en el ciclo anterior se hicieron estimaciones de la ronda 2011, se trajeron niveles de precio, moviéndolos por los indicadores relativos. Sin embargo, ustedes, como nosotros sabemos, el ciclo 2021 tiene pocas posibilidades, primero, de traer información del 2011. Segundo, dado la pandemia y todos los efectos que ha tenido respecto a sobre todo a las componentes de productos importados que nuestros países utilizan en el área de maquinaria y equipos, se nos va a hacer muy difícil hacer una estimación para el año 2021 o 2022, si fuera el referente, dado que todo lo que corresponde a comercio internacional ha tenido efectos significativos en cuanto a disponibilidad y a cambios de precios. Por otro lado, entonces eso nos va a generar grandes diferencias, tanto en los ítems como en los niveles de precio que vamos a tener observados en el 2021, y es por ello que solicitaríamos a estos países que no han podido levantar en las ocasiones previas, pudieran hacer algún esfuerzo para levantar algunos de los ítems más importantes en el tema de maquinaria y equipo. Y finalmente la idea de buscar fuentes complementarias, partiendo por los detalles de las especificaciones asociadas a los precios, vía las importaciones. Sabemos que una fuerte componente de maquinaria y equipo en nuestros países es importada, por lo tanto sería interesante o de relevancia que ustedes pudieran chequear en sus importaciones para los periodos de referencia la posibilidad de contar con algunos ítems de estas listas. Por otro lado, los productores nacionales, en particular todo lo que tiene que ver con el encabezado básico. Primero, que tiene que ver que son los productos metálicos, que muchos de los países tienen una componente nacional. Por otro lado, los sitios web oficiales de las marcas que estamos refiriéndonos en cada uno de los ítems. Cabe hacer notar que cuando yo hablo de levantar precios por Internet, estoy hablando de levantar precios por Internet en vía sitios oficiales de las marcas, teniendo presente que estos sí sean comercializados en nuestros países por algunos distribuidores. Es decir, yo no voy a ir a recolectar un precio para el cual no tengo un referente nacional respecto a la distribución en el comercio de esos ítems, porque no estamos hablando de importaciones directas desde diferentes partes del mundo, estamos hablando de representantes de las marcas o modelos que sí son comercializados en nuestros países. Y finalmente, como les mencionaba anteriormente, nosotros contamos con un buen set de folletos de los ítems que les vamos a poner a disposición de ustedes para que eso también nos permita tener buenos elementos para el chequeo de las especificaciones, el chequeo de los modelos, y obviamente también nos permita poder determinar cuáles serían los más adecuados en cuanto a los que no cuentan con marca y modelo, pero que sí pueden tener representatividad en nuestros países. Eso nos va a llevar a que los niveles de precio en esta ocasión puedan ser más comparables, teniendo presente siempre los elementos de especificaciones y representantes en nuestros países como fuentes de comercialización. Y les reitero que todo el material ya lo tenemos en español y sí. Disculpen. No escucho. Se los vamos a compartir una vez concluidas las sesiones de este taller, así como las presentaciones, también los materiales en español de estos ítems, tanto de los formularios como de las bases de información para la recolección. Bueno, eso les quería mencionar respecto a la situación del año 2017 del ciclo, y en cuanto al aprendizaje, las mejoras que sí pudiéramos incorporar en el ciclo 2021, dado que aun cuando no es una componente de gran participación como es el consumo de los hogares, sí es una componente de importancia que debemos representar y que va a ser muy difícil poder estimar en función de la información previa, si es que en el 2017 ustedes ya no habían recolectado precios. Y sabemos que también traer información de 2017 a 2021 o 2022 como referencia va a tener algunas dificultades bastante significativas, dado toda la situación de pandemia y los efectos sobre el comercio internacional, en particular para los productos importados. Muchas gracias y dejo a Vicky. Bien, eso sería lo que quería mencionarles.
Muchas gracias, Ernestina, por la presentación. De verdad que complementa muy bien esta presentación con el panorama que nos presentó inicialmente Peter sobre la lista y los cambios y las actualizaciones que se vienen, que se están presentando para este ciclo 2021. Entonces, si tienen algún comentario, alguna pregunta adicional a las presentaciones de esta sesión 2, de nuevo les pedimos que por favor las pongan en el chat y las vamos respondiendo oportunamente como lo hemos venido haciendo.
No hay preguntas, Vicky, en el chat.
No hay, gracias, listo. Entonces, antes de pasar a la sesión 3, que sería la última sesión para el día de hoy, les vamos a pedir a todos que por favor enciendan sus cámaras para tomar la foto de inicio del taller. Y nos tomamos 2 minuticos para que nuestros colegas del apoyo logístico nos ayuden con las fotos. Por favor, todos prendamos la cámara y una vez que tomemos la foto, la volvemos a apagar. Muchas gracias. John. ¿Están todos con la cámara prendida, por favor? Eso, para la foto.
Faltan algunos todavía, ¿no? Que abran su cámara. Ahí. John, ¿nos cuentas si es que tomaste la foto?
Listo.
Gracias.
¿Listo?
Sí, gracias.
Listo. Bueno. Muchas gracias a todos y entonces les pedimos por favor que volvamos a apagar la cámara y nosotros continuamos con la agenda. Estamos bien con el tiempo y en esta sesión 3 entonces ya vamos a entrar a trabajar en detalle la lista de los ítems y especificaciones de la encuesta de maquinaria y equipo. Y estas siguientes presentaciones, esta última para el día de hoy y las del día de mañana y pasado mañana estarán a cargo de nuestro consultor, el señor Peter Tabor. Y sin más, Peter, te dejo la palabra para que entonces iniciemos el trabajo ya más en detalle con cada una de las presentaciones que nos tienes preparadas. Muchas gracias. Sigue, por favor.
Thank you very much, Anna. So, as I promised, this day or this part of the day is going to be the worst part of the item list discussion. I promise the rest will be more easy. So for today, it's quite difficult, and I know it's asking quite much from you all to follow this, but well, we have to because we have to deal with the list. Okay, again, acknowledgements to ADB for giving us the permission to use the material. Part of the material was already presented there, but we have made sure that we work with the latest version of the World Bank data collection form available, which was a version I think originally submitted in August, and we worked with that and took all our slides to a remake, and so basically some pictures are left over from what was for ADB, and the rest is new. Okay, so first basic heading is basic heading fabricated metal products, except machinery and equipment. This covers quite a large variety of products. In the top left corner, bottom right corner, you see tanks in their not so typical situation, because normally these are underground storage tanks. And you have tool sets over here. You have a packaged steam boiler. You have a hacksaw or a beer keg or some others over here. So we will deal with all these different kinds of products, but they are all basically constructed from metal, and they are not machinery and equipment. So we have that over here. Probably one comment I should make first. We always show an overview item which lists all the items covered in the next item group. It will cover always unspecified and specified items if they are there. It will list the item codes as well as the item names. And then there may be on this slide for a group, there may be additional comments on that, but in this case, there are not. And then we go to the specific items there, or the unspecified items there, and discuss details of that. And so over here, we have two different double-skinned underground horizontal storage tanks, a larger one and a smaller one. Okay, the larger one, you may remember the picture. What is this used for? That's for underground storage of petrol, though it is rather large, and that's the reason why we have a smaller one too. That would be, for instance, used as a storage for petrol for a hauling company with lots of trucks, where they want to fill their trucks not at a normal gas station, but when they are at home, so to say, they fill up their trucks in their own area, in their own yard, and have such an underground storage tank be located there. A smaller tank can be found at the next item position. And one thing that is important over here is you always should read not only the specifications, but also the notes that Rui mentioned in his presentation for an item, because they give some additional information. Okay, the specs we have over here, as I said, we are not going into detail with all of the specs, but the important specs are normally encircled or marked by a red rectangle or by a variety of rectangles. I'm going to go into a bit of detail over here. We want to have a tank which is 100 cubic meters in size. I'm only going to mention the metric units. Imperial units are on the right-hand side of these two pipes. The tank has only one compartment. The typical length and diameter is 14 by 3. That's over here. Then you have an inner skin that has a thickness of steel of 8 millimeters. The outer skin has a thickness of steel for 4 millimeters, and the ends of the cylinders of the tanks, they are of thickness 6 millimeters. The classification of the steel, that is a European norm over here. If you have a corresponding or slightly varying norm in your country, that's okay. But specifications of this one is given in European norm 1025 on page 275. Test pressure for this tank is 0.3 to 0.4 bar. I hear Spanish translation now. Is that okay? Okay. The design pressure is 0.7 bar. The working temperature is from -20 degrees Celsius to +50 degrees Celsius. And what is important for this one, that has to do something with environmental protection. The external finish is black bitumen in this one. And the typical weight for such a tank would be something close to 15 tons, so 15,500 kilograms. You may probably wonder why there are, for an unspecified item, so many very specific parameters given. The reason for this is just the specifications for one typical representative of this one. And so the deviation, there may be some deviations, like you have a slightly higher diameter for your tank, but it's not as long as this one, or it has a slightly different temperature range, but not too different. Please report this all in your specifications if you can. If you cannot report a specification because it's not given in your information, just specify not available or something like that, but only do that if you really can't get it. And last but not least, it's on the internal, it's uncoated. So that's a standard finish for this one. As I said, this is 100 cubic meters size, and we are going to have another tank smaller than that. So as you can see over here, we have detailed the notes which are given in the data collection form as well as in the survey catalog. The tank has some additional information which is not given in the specs. The reason for this is that sometimes you can't put all of that down in a list of systematic specs. So please make sure to carefully read the notes on the items. Over here, we have a leak detection system. Remember, it's underground storage and nobody wants to spill into the groundwater some petrol or things like that. You have to have a connection kit, a dipstick, and a certificate that this tank conforms to a norm similar to what we have over here, Central European norm 12285. Over here, it says something about workshop fabricated steel tanks, and it gives other information for non-flammable water polluting liquids. So there's special definitions that it has to conform to this, and this should be made sure. And there are some other information. I don't go into all of the details. As I said, I want this to be used also as a reference. And so we put the information in the notes. As I said, it's a double skinned tank, so it has two skins. The area between that is normally filled with monopropylene glycol, and it's uncoated internally as given in the specs and coated with bitumen externally. If you have something different, please make a note of that and give that in the specs. So that was the set of information for the first item. The second item would be the smaller one. And if we have items which are otherwise very similar, we will highlight the major difference in the second slide. So that we have done over here. It's a different producer of an item. This item has 50 cubic meters capacity instead of the 100 meter that the former item had. And for that reason, it's expected to be significantly cheaper than the 100 cubic meters tank. So in the current European Comparison Program survey, we do not, well, we have a factor for that. We cannot tell you all of the information, but for this one, that is a final figure. The GM is something about, geometric mean is something about 15,000 euros, and the bigger tank is something about 26,000 euros. If you apply simple logic, it is twice the volume, so roughly twice the weight of steel. Not exactly, I know the formula is a bit different, but of course you have other equipment too, so it's not just the size and the material. There's some other cost to that too, but as you can see over here, the relation is 0.6, which is not too far away from the relation or the ratio of the two sizes that you have for this item. And we have the specifications over here. Biggest difference, 50 cubic meters. And of course, the typical size for that one is different. It's 10.8 by 2.5 meters. normally. It could be similar to that. Other parameters are very similar. The weight is for that model that we have shown on the previous page, roughly 8.3 tons, which is a little more than 50% of the 100 cubic meter tank. So if you find something which is much heavier than this, but still has 50 cubic meters, that probably is a good indication that it is either complying to a different norm or something else, because it has simply more material in it. So that should be a relation which should not be deviating too much. If you find, for instance, a tank which has 48 cubic meters, well, that is to be regarded still as close enough. But if you have something like 30 cubic meters, then we would expect that the price difference is just too big. So you should not report something which is very much deviating from the 50 cubic meter for this tank or for the 100 cubic meter from the previous tank. Apart from that, please, as I said, report all the parameters that you have. If they are slightly varying or slightly differing, that is not important. Both of these tanks, I'm not sure whether I have mentioned that before, they don't have any additional internal subdivisions, so it's only one big cell inside. Okay, so that covers this item. I do not know how ECLAC exactly wants me to handle that. I haven't addressed that before, sorry for doing that. Whether we want to be able to ask questions after each item group, or do you want to reserve the questions for the end? Can I have some feedback?
Peter, sí, la idea es que al final de cada sesión podamos ir resolviendo, invitamos a que los participantes en el chat vayan poniendo las preguntas y al final de cada sesión las vamos contestando.
Okay, so we will then go back to the slides that are in question. Thank you very much for that. Okay, and then I continue and don't pay attention to the chat. Okay, so second group of items, only one item there, stainless steel beer kegs. Though there are other kegs that other liquids that could be housed in a keg as well, we are not looking for a keg for the transport or storage of non-carbonated liquids. We had the problem in previous surveys that people reported prices for wine kegs, which is something different than what we are looking for, especially with respect to the sturdity and to the robustness of the keg. So this one, remember, beer kegs, if they are transported, people are putting them into the cellar of the bars, and they are quite heavily moved, and so they need to be very robust, other than kegs which are just for storage. Okay, so this is what a typical keg looks like. If you see something in the description of the keg being named rolling rims, these are, oops, sorry, that was the wrong one. These are these rims which ensure that you do not roll, in fact, over the complete surface of the keg, but only on the surface of these rings. That helps protect the surface of that one. We had mistakes in other surveys where countries priced such a keg, including pressure meters or the pipe work that is used to, or the pipes that are used to transport the beer or the other liquid to the actual tap. We don't want to include that in the price. So make sure to price just the keg. As I said before, the order size may have a significant impact on the price. In the European comparison program, the suggested order size was something like 1,000 kegs, but the unit price and the delivery costs, they should be reported for the calculation of one keg. So in an order size of 1,000, we want to have the price for one. Parameters, well, over here we have quite a number of parameters, but the most important ones are the size, 50 liters, and whether it is compliant to Euronorm specs. In Europe, we of course have to have this compliance to Euronorm specs. If this is different in your country, if that's a different norm, if you have the name of the norm, just for my curiosity, you could state that and I could compare that. But apart from that, that would be okay. So whatever is used or required in your country for storing and transporting beer in kegs. The material of the cylinder, this is important because, of course, if you drink something, it should better be something that is not polluting what you drink. So over here we have high nickel steel of type 304, and the rolling rings, they need to be very sturdy. So there we have a different type, that is type 316. If the type is different, please report it. You may still report the price, but we should be aware of what it is. Typical weight of such a 50-liter keg, if it is complying to what we have over there, is something like 11 to 12 kilogram. Might be slightly different. If it is like 5 kilogram, then it's probably not sturdy enough to be something that you can use for actually transporting beer. One thing you might notice, it's hidden on my screen right now. Over here you have the letters PDF. I use that for linking the item-related Acrobat documents that Ernestina mentioned in her presentation. This is additional survey material, and well, these item-related documents, you could of course select them yourself from the directory where they are stored, but if they are stored in the same location as the presentation, then you could just click on the hyperlink that's underneath the PDF, and you will get then immediate display of the PDF document. These documents, in some cases, they provide valuable information, for instance, about the address of the headquarter or the address of certain representations in certain countries or certain areas of the world, phone numbers. They could list examples of use for some other items that could, for instance, be product sheets, technical specification sheets, even price quotations we observed from the internet. So please make sure to read the PDF documents. This sometimes really helps, especially if you are doing the survey yourself and you are not familiar with the items. That might give you a grasp of what this item is really used for, what you should look for, and what the parameters mean. Sometimes that's much better than just a list of specifications without any additional explanation. So make use of this material. When we started this in 2004, we did not have any of this. And right now we have a PDF document for all of the specified items and for the unspecified ones which do not have a counterpart item. So that is available. So wherever you see PDF, if you click on that, you will get the PDF document for that. Next item is the packaged steam boiler. This is a quite complicated item, but it's quite important. It's used for heating purposes in mid-sized to big industrial applications. It's not so much heating of the room itself, it's process heating, which is, for instance, used in dairies. If you think of the production of milk powder from milk, or if you think of the process of making milk germ-free by pasteurization, heating, there you need a big amount of heat being transported to the area where you need it. It's not necessarily produced directly in the same location. It could be in one room and then transported through pipework to the case where it is, or to room where it is used. As we had beer kegs before, we also mentioned an example of a brewery. For instance, if you think of heating of the mesh, which is the corn that you have there, which is put together with water. And for instance, it could be also used for bottle cleaning and other purposes. So wherever you think of large amounts of steam being transported in a factory, that we are talking about. We don't have a brand for this. We have some examples mentioned in the notes. The item image and the PDF document show the EVA BHP 1000. If you have something like 1000 in the name, this is probably something which is okay, or which could be okay, because 1000 in this case stands for the steam production capacity of 1 ton per hour. So we have 1000 kilogram of steam standard production capacity. That sounds like quite a lot, and it is, but there are much bigger machines than that one. This is not the biggest one you can get. So, but you should find that from many producers. Important parameters over there. Most important one, steam at 100 degrees Celsius. That's the steam rating, could be given a different. We are looking for the one at 100 degrees Celsius. Should be 1000 kilogram per hour. We do not care whether it's oil or gas, both works fine. The working pressure that this can be used for should be in the area 6 bar to 16 bar. And then the other parameters are saying that we want to have the machine, including the burner and the pumps. We want to know which burner type you included. And then the typical size of this is 2,300 liters. It weighs, without the water in it, weighs about 3 tons, and it has a gas volume of about 1.1 cubic meter. So this one uses oil or gas to heat water, produce steam, and then the steam is transported to the place where it is needed. Okay, the notes, as I said, they mention several examples. We have producer Byworth, MX 1000, as I said, 1000 is the size. The LPV Calidad. Then we have something from Turkey. We have Ting Inox. We have Certus, BKS Kazan, and some others. Something from, I think it was Italy, Ferroli Vapoprex. So you might look for some of these names, and maybe you find something which is available in your country. But packaged steam boiler, 1000 kilogram or 1 ton, that might help to find the item too. Okay, one of the most popular items, because it's easy to find if it is available at all. As I said before, I'm going to stress that again. A mistake which is often made is that somebody does not find the barcode, okay, but finds something matching the parameters very closely, and then puts it in the wrong item position over here in the position Hacksaw unspecified beneath it or after it. It should then, if it is an equivalent item for the Barco Hacksaw, it should be put in the position before it. If it is an equivalent item or comparable item for the Stanley, it should be put in the position with the end digits 080. So always remember, counterpart branded item is in the list next to in the next position, not in the previous position. We have that differently in our survey. That's why I mentioned that in the survey for European comparison. Okay, first hacksaw is a Barco Hacksaw, very popular brand from Sweden. This is the model 325. This hacksaw is used for cutting metal pipes, cutting metal bars, and something similar like that. You should select, as I said before, a model for professional use, not a DIY model. You can see, for instance, in this case, it has quite good grip rather than some simple metal. It has something, I think it's covered with rubber or something like that, that makes it more comfortable to use for a certain amount of time. Remember, if you are cutting pipes on a work yard, you're probably not doing that only for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. You may be doing that for more or less a whole day with intervals, of course, and then you would appreciate something which is really comfortable to use. Important parameters: with all our branded items, we always encircle make and model. The reason is, you can't stress that often enough, only price this brand and this model over here. If it is something different brand, it doesn't belong to this position. The first important thing is it an aluminum frame or a steel frame? In this case, it's an aluminum frame. Does the item have integrated blade storage? Yes or no? No in this case. Do you have a quick change mechanism? Yes. How many teeth does it have per centimeters? This is 9.4 teeth per centimeters. That looked arbitrary, but in fact 24 teeth per inch. That's where the original measure was. It should have 2 cutting positions, so you can put the blade. I'm going back one. You could put the blade either in this position or it could be tilted. So that should be available. The blade length is 300 millimeters. This is important. The overall length might differ a bit for the counterpart unspecified item, but of course for the Barco it should read 395. If it is much different from that, it's probably not the correct model. Cutting capacity, of course, is important. It has a maximum cutting capacity of 120 millimeters. That has to do something with the distance between the blade and the frame. So if this is too narrow, you can't cut like 12 centimeters, then it is something different. So if you look into your toolbox that you have at home, you will probably find something that looks much easier, well, not easier, much simpler than that. A simple frame made of steel, only one cutting position, not a very comfortable grip and something like that. Please do not price this. Okay, then we have the Stanley. Major difference between the Stanley and the Barco is that the Stanley has a steel frame instead of the aluminum frame, and because of the difference in the spacing over here, it has a slightly lower cutting capacity. Well, just to give you an impression how these two relate to each other, in the survey in 2019 in Eurostat, the Stanley Hacksaw was on average cheaper than the Barco, and this is also the case for our current results for the survey in 2021. So that looks like a very stable picture. That does not necessarily mean it has to be the same in your country. It could be that in your country, brands from USA, for instance, are regarded to be something better than brands from Sweden, well, or the other way around. And so if these are more popular in your country because of the item being, or the brand being renowned, that might have an impact on the prices. So if you find both, price both. If you find only one and say, well, the other one is really not so important, you could report a price, but you would not necessarily have to. And that would be the only exception that I would probably make if you want to assist other countries and you have this item available in your country, but it's in fact not so often sold. You might normally tend to not reporting the price, but as was said before, in order to enlarge the number of comparisons, it might be very well worth to report that. Parameters, as I said before, we have the rigid steel tube there, 9.4 teeth per centimeters. blade length 300 millimeters. It's slightly longer than the other one, and you have a maximum capacity for cutting, which is slightly lower than the 120 millimeters than we had before. What's important to know, if you have a product number like the one, oh, sorry, what was that? If you have a product number like this one over here, that might help when you look for the item on the internet. So make sure if you have something like that, enter that in your Google or whatever you use as a search machine search to find a source for a price for this item. And then make sure you actually have that one. Next group, we already had an image for that, automotive tool sets. That was an item that was significantly changed from the previous survey. It's an item produced by Facom, which is a French producer. As I said before, the tools are over here sorted in foam trays rather than in a box. It's a rather professional and quite expensive tool set for use in car repair shops. And these foam trays, they are suitable for storage in a workshop trolley. These are typically these red or blue boxes with a lot of drawers, and you put these over there and to put together your set of your arrangement of items that you want to have in your workshop trolley. Okay, so the toolset denomination is toolset CM.138 without the box. And again, we stress without the box. 138, this stands for the number of pieces that you have over there. And it then gives some details of what you have in there, like 29 wrenches, 11 plus 18 sockets. That has to do with, I think, different measures, metric and imperial of the sockets. You have 29 screwdrivers, you have 4 pairs of pliers, 2 hammers, and 45 other pieces. Over here, you see the company website. Such references are given for all of the specified items, and they may help you to find a source for this item, because many of the producers nowadays point you towards a dealer. And many of the companies, if they operate internationally, they have maybe having separate websites for certain countries where you might even find that in your own language. Like, if I get it, Spanish or Portuguese in most cases. Okay, more details on this item, because over here it only says 29 branches, can be found in the item related PDF document. I made an extract from the PDF document to enlarge that over here. More details are given there. So we have a 17-piece module of ring wrenches from 6 to 24 millimeters. And we have a 12-piece module of ring wrenches 18 to 90 millimeters. These are the model numbers for this, because at Facom you can buy everything separately. Remember, these are small pieces in some cases, and you might lose them in your shop or wherever. And then you would need a replacement. You don't want to buy the full set, so you can order almost everything separately. Then you have different screwdrivers, various modules, apply module, an impact module, which is containing 2 hammers. And then you have 1/4 inch sockets and 1/2 inch sockets. And this then totals to the number of pieces that is given, and like 138. So that might be quite difficult to find as a very close match. So just try to find something that is for autumn. If you are looking for the generic position, try to find something which is similar from the composition of the tools and similar to the quality that you have there, and which is used for car repair in a car repair shop. If you have something which is DIY equipment, so do-it-yourself equipment again, that is probably not a good brand that you should use there. Okay, so that was the first part. I do not know how far we are with the time. We could either, because right now we have reached the border of the next item. That depends on what ICLAC prefers. Do you want to have discussions on the questions for fabricated metal products first and then close the session, or do we want to continue and then take the questions afterwards? Because with that, I would have to stick to the...
Gracias, Peter. Sí, tenemos hasta las 12:30 programado, entonces me parece bien tu propuesta de tomarnos estos 15 minutos que nos quedan para responder las preguntas y los comentarios que hubiera en el chat. A este momento tenemos dos preguntas que responder. Entonces, si quieres, dame un segundito y las leemos, o le pido a Claudia que me ayude también con la lectura, por favor.
Hay dos preguntas. Creo que una está relacionada a la oficina global, que
Sí.
es un comentario de Marisa Ramotar de CARICOM. Si quieres la leo, si quieres la lees tú directamente, Marisa. Marisa, would you do the...
Hello, I can read it if you wish.
Yes.
I can go ahead then. So I was noting based on Ernestine's presentation that several of the CARICOM countries struggle to collect items on this survey for the main reason being lack of resources, both human and financial. But I wanted to go back to a question that was previously asked, that is several of the items on this particular survey may be only available by pre-order. And how do we reconcile that with the idea of collecting items that are representative in the country? And how to be possible to collect enough items if several of them may only be available by pre-order, and the information can be useful for the ICLAC. Thank you.
Okay, somebody from ICLAC going to answer to this?
Maybe Rui can answer this question.
Hello. Yes. Thank you, Marisa. So as I said before, this has to be consistent with national accounts. So it needs to be representative. So the items that you price have to be representative of the country production. So if you are not going to price things that nobody in the country is using or consuming because those industries do not exist, then it wouldn't be representative. But I would like to answer this question. This is a difficult question, and I would like to answer it in greater detail tomorrow. So sorry, it's the mic. So tomorrow morning we can start with this question. I can give more detail because I also need to see what was done on the last ICP cycle, and then I can perhaps help you better with this one.
Okay.
Thank you, Rui. And Peter, would you like to add something in this comment?
Well, I could probably for the approach that I have seen at a couple of instances. Well, you should check whether this machine or particular item would actually be used in your country, or is actually used in your country, is actually market it in your country. So if that is not done, don't try to price it, because then this is probably not representative, as Rui said. If it is in fact used, but if the importer just waits for your order, then check with your national accounts whether they then regard that as going into that category. If that is, that's fine. And I think for the rest, I would refer that to Rui for the discussion tomorrow morning. I think that's probably better in your case, so he can check the situation that was applied for the last survey for your area.
Thank you, Peter. But we have another question from Stefan Paul on the storage tank.
Yeah, I see that.
Can you see the question, or?
Yeah, I can see the question. Let's see. The event items such as the storage tank is the same materials. Well, if in your country typically other dimensions are used, with dimensions I mean not the size, the actual volume, but something else. Well, then that is difficult, because if you have a local producer that typically has a 75 cubic meter tank, then I would assume if he does that on a general regime, then he would ask extra for the 50 cubic meters tank. So then that would be very difficult to come up with a good guess for what a good 50 meter tank would normally cost in that country. So in this case, we would need to have another discussion about this. If it is made to order generally, if they wait for an order, and if that order comes in and then he makes the tank, then I think there's no big difference. Then you could report this price, because typically I do not see many producers having like 100s of these tanks on stock.
Gracias, Peter.
Does that answer your question, Stefan? So probably until we get a reaction from Stefan, I can address the question that Melvin just asked. Yeah, I think that is related to what was given before by Rui, and I would, if possible, ask Rui to combine that with the other question he's going to address tomorrow morning, because I think that relates to the same question.
Yes, it relates to the same question. And so I was saying, so tomorrow morning, I can give more clarity on this issue. But as Peter also said, so the important thing is, this item, should we price this item? Do we have an industry in your country that uses this item or not? If there is no industry that makes use of these items that are being priced, then you should not price them. If these are products that are used in your country and that they are relevant, then you should price it. And you should see what we have also done in the last cycle, the ICP 2017 cycle. But regarding this, we are going to have a discussion tomorrow morning to address this in greater detail.
Yeah, I could probably give an example of machinery you would not price in certain European countries, which would be textile machinery. If you are speaking about button sewing machines or something like that, lock stitch machines, if you have no textile industry actually left in your country that uses these machines, there's no sense in selling that. And so if you then run into an importer who says, yeah, I can give you a price for that. If you want a Yuki machine for this and that, I can get that. He is probably charging you much more because he's knowing that this is probably a one-off sale that he's going to make. So if you don't have a good industry that needs this equipment and buys this equipment, it's probably not worth pricing it. Yeah, well, that probably relates to the same that Carly McLennan just mentioned. Readily available with the exception if that is something that is normally made to order or built to order, then it should be readily available after the order. But apart from that, it is only to be imported from outside. That is going to be what is going to be covered by Rui tomorrow. And it should be used in the country, yes. Okay. Should we start with electrical optical equipment or are we? Yeah, it's probably too close, huh?
No, gracias, Peter, por las respuestas a las preguntas, también a Rui y a Claudia. Y sí, estamos de acuerdo contigo que sería por hoy dar por terminada la sesión y dejamos para iniciar mañana este nuevo grupo de productos, la revisión de un nuevo grupo en la lista. Entonces, en ese sentido, damos las gracias a todos los participantes en el taller del día de hoy. Damos las gracias especialmente a Peter por el esfuerzo y la dedicación con las presentaciones y el detalle en las explicaciones para todos nosotros. Gracias, William, gracias, Rui, y todos los demás colegas que nos ayudaron hoy con las presentaciones. Les recordamos que la hora de inicio del taller es a las 10 de la mañana, a las 10 a.m. hora de Chile, que eso corresponde a las 8 a.m. hora de algunos de los países del Caribe y de Centroamérica, y en algunos casos excepcionales a las 7 a.m. hora, por ejemplo, de México y otros países de más al norte. Entonces, y bueno, Peter, que también está en un horario bien distinto al nuestro. Entonces, sin más, pues les deseamos un feliz resto de día y nos vemos mañana a las 10 de la mañana, hora de Chile.